Salutations! Welcome to Loving the Language of Literacy. My name is Sophia Lee, and today I'm doing my December wrap-up. I'm going to film this wrap-up in several parts, just filming a little clip or two every time I finish a book, so I will be wearing different clothes. Overall this month I read 14 books, which is just shy of my monthly goal. And every month I challenge myself to read 15 books, but of course it never happened. My favorite book of December 2014 was Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare, because how could it not be? And my two runner-ups were Snow Like Ashes and Is Everyone Hanging Out Without Me and Other Concerns. December was a great reading month. I probably could have read more while being on break, but surprisingly I read less on break than I read when I'm busy. Well, let's get into this. Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. I had to read this for school, for my English class, Lit Circle. I ended up loving it. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It's about this boy named Charlie who has an IQ of 68. He undergoes his operation to become smart, and eventually his IQ goes all the way up to 200. The story was originally adapted from a short story, and we get to see his journey because his EQ does not match up with his IQ, and as he gets smarter and smarter, his brain, in terms of his maturity levels, does not catch up with him. And it is so interesting to see how he navigates these seemingly normal occurrences and events of life, but through this new perspective. Never read another book like this. It is so heartwarming and deep. I know I say that I'm usually unemotional when it comes to books, but I almost cried because the ending will break your heart. I also read 1,000 Pieces of You by Claudia Gray. It's about a girl named Marguerite, or Margaret, someone correct me on this. She lives in the United States, but her parents are famous physicists. They have created a Firebird, and a Firebird is this device which helps you jump through parallel universes. And these parallel universes are created every single time you make a choice. What happens is her father is supposedly killed by Paul Markov, who was her parents' assistant. She has to chase him through various parallel universes to hunt him down and kill him back, because he killed her father and destroyed a lot of important information. But what happens is that she starts falling in love with him. Things are not they always seem. The romance was absolutely tantalizing, and the love triangle, while I didn't like the love triangle, added some extra elements, especially with how different people can be, or how similar people can be through the various parallel universes. And I have a written review up on my blog. I read the last two books in the Infernal Devices trilogy, Clockwork Prince and Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare. I loved them. I read Clockwork Angel back in September 2014. I thought it was okay. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The style was a lot different from what I was used to. I was out of my element. By the end of the series, I am in love with the Shadowhunter world. I love England in the 1800s. If you don't know what these books are about, which is kind of surprising considering how long they've been around and how famous Cassandra Clare is, it is so much fun. There is a main character named Tessa. She resides in the London Institute of Shadowhunters. She and her friends slash potential lovers go on a bunch of adventures to reach this goal and figure out questions, and it's so complicated and so rich, and the world building is absolutely incredible. I read The Infernal Devices first before the Mortal Instruments because I'm kind of scared of Steve Bones, and if it will be too complicated, or if I will be bored in the first book. Per Katie Chastik and Christine from Pulmonano's Books Advice, you can read The Infernal Devices first. Even if your friends shame you for it, you can definitely read them first. And I gave Clockwork Prince 4 out of 5 stars and Clockwork Princess 5 out of 5 stars because these were so good. I received an e-arc from Edelweiss of Ignite by Sarah B. Larson. Funny story, I filmed for like half an hour for this review, but my thoughts were so mangled. There was a lot of technical difficulties with cameras, locations, and lighting, and I just could not bear to post that on the internet, so I buckled down, spent half an hour writing the review, and it's currently live on my blog, so you can check that out if you want. Ignite is the sequel to Defy. I gave it a 45%. It could not compete in terms of the characters, the romance, and the plot were all really flimsy and weak. The writing style felt Disney-fied and cliche, and I just disliked it a lot. I will be reading the sequel, however, because it had so much potential to be good. The next book I read this month was Rethinking Normal by Katie Rain Hill. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And this is actually a really interesting book. I didn't even know what it was about. It's a non-fiction memoir, which I don't normally read. This is about a girl who transitioned from a boy when she was younger as Lucas to Katie. 90% of the time I will have an issue with a memoir. Then I will feel bad because it's a real person that I'm insulting and not a book character. That's usually because I disagree with the protagonist slash main characters slash real person's actions. But what was amazing was that I first of all agreed with Katie Rain Hill. Another thing is I loved her voice. At the very beginning of the book, it was really kind of odd. It was strangely blunt and to the point and just, these are the facts, I'm not going to sugarcoat them, these are them, accept me for who I am. I love that. I think that's because of her background, who she is, what she came from. I gradually grew to love that feeling throughout the book. And it's just about her struggles, both romantically, emotionally, physically, everything that has to do with being a transgender girl, bullied and outcasted from society, and then overcoming that and becoming essentially a new person. The next book I read this month was Stoner and Spaz by Ron Coder. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars and I really liked it. Since moving to a new state and starting a new school, I have, of course, become BFFs with the school's librarian. It's kind of freaky. I wouldn't say we're on a first name basis yet. It's only been a month, but we might get there by the end of the year because there are only 2 options at lunchtime: stay in the cafeteria or go to the library. And what do I choose? The library. I've had so many thought-provoking conversations with her. Something really funny she said, because I think she can detect my apprehension for reading books that are older. She was like, you know, Sophia, there are books that are good that are published before 2010. This is one of them. I have never heard of this. It's from Candlewick Press. It is about a drug addict named Colleen and a boy with cerebral palsy named Ben. This entire book is 170 pages of pure gold. It's basically a book about relationships. There are 2 big side characters, Ben's grandmother, Ben's neighbor Marcy. This book is basically built on Ben's relationship with these 3 women, Colleen, Marcy, and his grandmother. Something very interesting that my librarian pointed out to me was when a book doesn't have much romance, the relationships themselves, when written well, become their own characters. I've never ever thought of it this way before, and when she said it, I thought she was a genius because it's completely and absolutely true. I am so excited to have read this book, and I have the sequel as well. In these few pages, it encapsulates a boy's struggle and a kind of coming of age, coming to terms with who he is story. The next book I read this month was Now Playing Stoner and Spaz by Ron Coder, which is the sequel to Stoner and Spaz. This book had a serious case of the sophomore slump, not necessarily of the author's career itself, but definitely of the storyline. The story picks up a few days after Stoner and Spaz left off. It's about 40 pages longer than the last one, and it did not give me at all the same feelings that I had with Stoner and Spaz. The relationships that I loved so much were not nearly as strong between Ben and his grandmother or Ben and Marcy. What we do really see a lot is his relationship with Colleen, which develops and warps and melds and evolves. There's these fine lines that the 2 characters walk, and you never quite know which side of them you're on. It's kind of confusing that way. We also see Ben's mom in this book, which I was so excited about and was a really nice touch to the story, but it still did not really fill in for the absence of these strong relationships and strong characters themselves that we saw in the first book. We also had this love triangle kind of vibe going on between AJ and Ben, because AJ seems so much more like the person Ben would date. She is smart, she is a filmmaker, she is wealthy, she's going places. Meanwhile, Colleen's dealing with the down and dirty kind of aspects of life. Overall, I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. By page 100, I was basically dying. It was so bad in comparison to Stoner and Spaz, but alone, it was a pretty good book. I think this title is incredibly uncreative. The first book is Stoner and Spaz, and the sequel is just now playing Stoner and Spaz Part 2. I see it's kind of like that movie-making vibe that's underlying the whole thing, but at the same time, it's not adequate. The next book I read this month was Say What You Will by Kimmy McGovern, which I gave 2 out of 5 stars to. This is because of lack of connection with the characters due to a third-person story. In the past month, I have read 5 books with main characters with some sort of disability, whether that's narcolepsy or cerebral palsy or a very low IQ. If you don't write it correctly, you will feel nothing for these characters. Of course, the person themselves might not want you to feel sympathy for them, but most definitely, as a person, you kind of feel obligated to feel for those people. But in this case, I could not feel like I was rooting for these characters. It was kind of bizarre, actually, how much I did not care. There's Amy, who's gone through so frickin' much throughout the entire book and throughout her entire life as a character. Then there's Matthew, who has crippling OCD, and their relationship, which should be something to root for in and of itself, minus the people even. This is very interesting because in Stoner and Spaz, Spaz was not less of a person or a character because of his disability. It was almost like it wasn't there, but it still added enough to the story for it to be relevant. With Flowers for Algernon, the entire book revolved around his disability, and it was written beautifully. So it's really interesting to see the contrast between writing styles. The next book I read this month was The Extraordinary Education of Nicholas Benedict by Trenton Lee Stewart. I really go into a lot of detail in my Cramathon Day 3 update because this is a childhood fave of all time. There's something about Trenton Lee Stewart's writing, something contagious, something igniting about him and his writing that makes it absolutely so purely enjoyable to read. It's like drinking a good cup of tea with a ton of honey in it. It goes down your throat so easily and you're enjoying every single moment of it. There's these characters that are so well developed while still being on a understandable level and a relatable one. There's this boy who has narcolepsy and an unusually large nose and an IQ of probably 200. Stewart does it in a way where you just feel so close to the characters. You have so much faith in them because they're funny, they're relatable, they have the same struggles as you do. It's not just Nicholas, it's his friend John Cole, who is a big brother figure for him and who makes sacrifices. And then there's Violet, the deaf girl they befriend on their many adventures together. There's just something about truly well-written middle grade that can be so timeless and classic. You can say the word adventures and make it sound like you're not talking about some little middle grade novel with a flimsy plot, but something that you can really honestly believe in and have faith in as a characters. And that is why I rated this book 5 out of 5 stars. If I had read the whole Mysterious Panic Society this year, it would definitely have taken the place of the Ascendance trilogy for the best middle grade. Even though I raved on and on, you can't beat the feeling when you feel like you are the character. Location change. The next book I read this month is Panic by Lauren Oliver, and I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. There's a small town called Carr, and every single day of high school, every single student has to contribute $1 to this big pot of money. And at the end of the year, only the seniors can compete in terrifying challenges to win this pot of money. There are 4 main characters, Heather, Natalie, Dodge, and Bishop. They all have their own reasons for why they're participating in Panic. Some of them are doing it because they want the money, some of them are doing it to get better lives for their families. The reason I didn't like this book really was because I just didn't feel anything for anything. It seems to me like every single book I read of Lauren Oliver, my opinion of her kind of decreases, which I'm kind of sad about because a lot of people I know love her. But I've read Delirium and Before I Fall. The characters weren't that relatable. It was third person, I couldn't connect with them as much. Panic was actually a book explosion book of the month. A lot of the people thought that the challenges in Panic were absolutely terrifying. I, however, thought they were scary, but the way that they were written didn't seem that terrifying to me. And the writing was a lot better, in my opinion, than Before I Fall. In comparison, considerably lower quality in Panic. The next book I read is Everyone Hanging Out Without Me and Other Concerns by Mindy Kaling. I absolutely loved this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It was the best nonfiction of this entire year, and I'm officially in love with Mindy Kaling. I laughed out loud so many times. I read it in basically one sitting. Mindy Kaling is an actress and a comedy writer. This book is basically a series of memoirs and pictures interspersed. It's just an overall really funny book. It's a lot different from Yes Please, because Yes Please felt a lot more scattered and lengthy, but because each essay was so short, there was no way to make it feel scattered because you knew that the events were going to be all over the timeline. The next book I read was Snow Like Ashes by Sarah Rosh. This was the second to last book I read in 2014. It made my 10th favorite book of the year. I go in complete detail in other videos. And on Twitter, I ranted on and on about how much I love this book. But basically, it's a high fantasy novel where there are 4 seasons and 4 rhythms. The seasons are, of course, winter, autumn, spring, and summer. And the rhythms go through all the seasons. And there's this main character named Mira who is part of the winter season. She's one of 7 refugees who've made it out alive. I have a written review on my blog for this. It was just an overall wonderful book, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars to. The pacing was lightning fast. The romance was very subtle, but very good at the same time. The action was undescribably good, even though there were a lot of marks of a debut author, ways things were phrased and how the plot carried on. It was still very good. Mira was a bit immature at the beginning, but that's what fantasy novels are for. Authors have lots of pages to flesh out and develop these characters, and I am so excited for Ice Like Fire, the second book, to come out next fall. Actually, it's this fall! Oh my god, 2015 is this fall. The last book of 2014 is The Body Electric by Beth Revis, which I read for a blog tour, and my review will be going up very soon. This was so good. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It's a young adult science fiction novel that follows a teenage girl named Ella Shepard. Her mom created this technology called Reveries, and Reveries allow you to relive in perfect clarity memories that you have. And there's a lot of conflicts going on. Her mom has Heb's disease, which is gradually killing her. The government wants her to spy on this guy who she met mysteriously. It's basically this huge, epic sci-fi mystery, and there are so many plot twists. I didn't like Across the Universe by Beth Revis, but I loved this book, and I will most definitely be picking up other ones by her in the near future. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a great time. Keep calm and read on, and tell me what you read in December. Goodbye! QR sweatshirt. Okay. What did they do? Make it rap? Oh, I'm saying and too much, Emma. Yeah, I know. This only happens when I film. Like, I don't say and.
Pretend you're ranting to me.
In life.
Pretend you're ranting to me.